All right, hello everybody. Welcome to Strengthening Your Application, a webinar in which we will offer tips and advice on ways that you can take your application to the next level before you submit your National College Match application at the end of the month. All right, but before we begin, I would love to introduce myself. So my name is Selena. I'm a program associate here on the student outreach team at Questbridge, and I'm also a Questbridge alum. So I'm originally from South Carolina, and you know, as you may assume by being a Questbridge alum, I grew up low income. I was also first generation in South Carolina, and I always really wondered like what my college journey would look like. I knew that I really dreamt of going out of state. I did not want to stay in South Carolina. But in my junior year, I actually first applied to the College Prep Scholars program and I wasn't selected as a college prep scholar. So I was pretty sad. And I think in that moment, I really felt like my dream of going to school out of state it felt very out of reach. But that summer after my junior year, I really took a lot of time to reflect and to think about ways that I could strengthen my application. Because I knew that, I had the grades, I knew that I was from a low income background, and so I really wanted to try again. And so I did persevere and I ended up matching to Pomona College. And so, by strengthening my application, I really did put forward my best application. And so it is through that experience that I hope to share a lot of my guidance and advice today in this presentation, but also because I've read, hundreds of National College Match applications. And so hopefully this presentation, this webinar is really helpful and insightful for you all. All right. Now, over the course of the hour that you are with us, we're going to cover a variety of items. First, we'll do a quick overview of the National College Match timeline and application components, namely the ones that you are responsible for and ones that rely on a teacher or a counselor. After that, we'll review helpful checklists and reminders for some important application sections. Then we'll explore the various ways that you can highlight who you are and your unique story throughout the application. And we'll share strategies that you can keep in mind as you actually work on various sections of the application. We'll even be joined by a special guest from InitialView to talk about the Glimpse video, which is a part of your application. And finally, we'll review 2 must-do steps that you should take before you submit your application. Now we have lots to get through, so let's get started. All right, so first up, an overview. Now, we have simplified the application timeline to include what is most important for you to know right now. Most importantly, your National College Match application is due September 30th by 11:59 p.m. Pacific time. This means that if you're on the East Coast, your application will be due by 2:59 a.m. Eastern time. Note that all of your application materials, including transcripts, recommendations, and school report, are due at this time as well. Then you'll need to submit your rankings list on October 16th. If you are interested in being considered for the full 4-year scholarship, you must submit your rankings list by this deadline. Now, as a reminder, your rankings list is comprised of up to 15 of our college partners that you would be happy to attend if you were matched to one of those schools. You don't have to rank all 15, and you can rank as many as you'd like, just a max of 15. Please also note that your match agreement form is due on October 16th. This form requires a signature from your parent or legal guardian and your high school counselor. If you find that you're not able to get the signatures in time, please do prioritize submitting the match rankings form, since we will not be able to make any exceptions on late submissions for the match rankings form. And finally, we'll be reaching out to all applicants on October 21st, and you'll receive an email letting you know that a status update has been added to your Manage page. And if you are selected as a finalist, you'll be able to move on to the next step of the process. All right. Now let's go through the application components of the National College Match application. As I go through, let me know if you started your application in the chat. I'd love to know. And if you have, share which section you're currently working on. We're really curious to see what you're currently working on. Now, the application sections here in blue are the ones that you have control over, right? So that means that it is your responsibility to submit these by the application deadline of September 30th. This includes all the sections in your application, like the personal section, the household section, academics, activities, and the writing sections. In addition, You can also submit numerous application materials, like an unofficial transcript, test score reports, a school profile, if these are available to you, a school profile, if that's available to you specifically. Then there are the application components that you may need to ensure that are submitted on your behalf, right? So you need to have your teacher or your high school counselor submit these for you. So that would be here in the yellow, the 2 teacher recommendations from recent core subject teachers and 1 school report from your current high school counselor. In order for them to receive a link to submit their recommendations, you will need to first register them in the appropriate sections of the application. Please note that your current high school counselor can submit your transcript, your test score reports, and school profile as part of their school report, but it may also give you extra peace of mind to submit these on your own just in case. Now, as you may have noticed throughout your application, some application sections are more about providing factual information, like information about your household or income. Now, let's review some important reminders and things to make sure of as you're completing these sections. First up, we have the household section. So, you need to complete each field in this section. And if you don't know the answer, you can write NA and provide additional context in the additional information section. You should only write 0 if that is accurate. Note that the review and submit section will also point out if you've left fields blank. So be sure to review all of the fields carefully and take your time for this part. The second point is that if your family has experienced unexpected changes to employment, income, or household size, please provide additional context in the additional information section using exact numbers when that is applicable. Using exact numbers will be especially helpful in our review. For example, if your family is responsible for significant medical bills for someone in your immediate household, letting us know the exact amount each month helps us understand how this cost impacts your family. The third thing is that if you live with anyone other than your parents or legal guardian, like a temporary or other guardian, sibling, or family friend, do not report their financial information. In most of the cases that we see, students will need to report the financial information of their parents/legal guardians. Sometimes we see cases of students living with other family members or non-legal guardians in temporary situations, and it's in cases like these where you do not need to report those individuals' financial information. Another example that we see often is cases where a student's parents are divorced and one or both of their parents have a different partner. If your parent is not married to their partner, you would not need to report that partner's financial information. We do know that these situations can be complicated, so please do reach out if you're unsure. It's best to inquire to ensure that we are able to fully assess and review your application. You can email us for those specific, more personal questions. And finally, ensure that each income source in your income and assets section is only reported once. Check that the total household income accurately reflects your family's income. We see this error often. A number will be reported twice, sometimes in both the question about wages and salary and gross dividend income, which are 2 different things, and it will essentially double your family's income. As a general rule of thumb, a number on your family's tax document should only be reported once. So double check that the bolded total household income in your application. Make sure that it looks right. All right, next up, recommendations and school report. First up, if you haven't already, be sure to register 2 teachers, preferably from recent core subjects, to complete your recommendations and your high school counselor for your school report. It's best practice to give your teachers and recommenders several weeks to submit their recommendations. So do this as soon as you can, especially if you know that many students may be asking the same teacher or counselor for a recommendation. Next, check in with your teachers and high school counselor to ensure that they've received the link to submit their form. Once you've registered your recommenders, check in with them, preferably in person. Ask if they received an email from QuestBridge with the link to submit their recommendation or school report. If they haven't received that link or email, first make sure that you wrote their email correctly in your application. If it looks right, instruct them to email us directly and include your QuestBridge ID number, which you should provide to them. Sometimes school firewalls will block external emails, so checking in with them soon after you register them will ensure that they're not frantically looking for the email a few days before the deadline when we're busy responding to hundreds of emails. Next, as the deadline approaches, gently remind your recommenders to submit by the application deadline of September 30th at 11:59 p.m. Pacific time. Again, if you do this in person or send them an email, I'd recommend reminding them a week before the deadline. Be sure to check your Manage page to see if they've already submitted the recommendation first. And finally, this is optional. You can complete a recommender information sheet to help your teachers write strong recommendations for you. Again, this one is optional, but can be helpful in cases where your recommender might be busy or if they're relatively new and may not know you super well. It's a short worksheet that you fill out to highlight things you'd appreciate your recommender writing about in your recommendation. We'll share a link to this in the chat now. All right, finally, the academic section. First, ensure that you've listed all of your 12th grade courses that you're currently taking and those that you plan to take. Double check that you correctly input your high school counselor's information. If there's a mistake, you should exclude and then re-register them. There's a helpful article in Ask QB that walks through the steps of excluding and re-registering the counselor. Note that this only applies if you have not submitted your application. If you've already submitted your application, you'll need to email us directly. We'll share the link to this article in the chat now as well. Third, submit an unofficial transcript. If you are submitting photos or scanned copies, please make sure that they are clear and easy to read. We recommend reviewing the file that you've uploaded to check that it's easy to understand and that it's clear. If you can't make it out, then we won't be able to either. Since this is an integral and required part of your application, not being able to read your transcript will negatively impact the review of your application. And finally, if a dual enrollment course does not appear on your high school transcript, you need to submit an additional transcript from the other institution. Again, this is only the case if a course that you've taken does not appear on your high school transcript. So if it does, you're all set. Now, hopefully these resources sound familiar if you've watched other webinars or if you read our emails, but in case it's late in the night and you're feeling unsure, these are going to be great places to start. Nearly every section of the application, including those I just talked about, have an accompanying Quest Tips video linked in the corresponding section of the application. These videos will link you to specific resources for its application section. And believe it or not, many of the questions that you have are questions that we've answered already in our online help portal, Ask QB. Over the years, we've gathered the most common and frequently asked questions, and it's divided by application section and relevant timelines. If you can't find a question there, you can submit a form to have your question sent directly to our team for review. And finally, we are truly invested in helping you submit a strong application, so you can explore our resource library to find various resources to help you throughout the process. One of my favorites is the Income and Assets Guide, which explains each of the questions in the Income and Assets section and how to respond to them. Now, let's explore the various ways that you can highlight your story throughout your application. Now, believe it or not, the activities section is one of the first places where your story starts to come together. Through the activities section, we are really trying to understand the various ways that you contribute to your family and/or various communities. Due to time right now, we're not going to go in depth into paid work and home or family responsibilities, but please note that those are really valuable pieces of the application. So if you have anything to share there, please do complete those sections thoroughly. In the extracurriculars and other activities, however, there are various ways to take it to that next level by not only telling us what you're involved in, but by being intentional about how you present that information. First, know that you are limited to 5 activities. For some, that's plenty of space to talk about your activities, but for others, you may find that you're having a hard time narrowing it down. So, when selecting which activities to include in your application, choose ones that highlight your joy and your passion. Choose ones that exemplify your leadership and your growth, and connect to potential fields or careers of interest. For example, maybe you're trying to narrow down activities, and one that you're considering including is running club, because you've been a part of it since 9th grade, but it's not something you're passionate about anymore or that you're interested in pursuing in college. So perhaps that is one of the activities that you could cut. After picking your activities, intentionally crafting your descriptions will be just as important. I will admit, with a very limited word count in the applications, sometimes you have to get creative with how you write your descriptions. But across your various activities, your descriptions should help us learn about notable responsibilities, how you've learned or grown, any changes or impact that you've made, ways that you've shown initiative, and why an activity is important to you. So let's look at some examples. Now, here's one example where the activity is French Club. Though you provide additional information in the application like years involved and the highest positions, these examples will just focus on the description. Now here the description says brainstorm weekly language learning opportunities and lead a new pen pal program for 20 students. This is a strong activity description because it touches on initiative, like leading a new pen pal program, impact, so 20 students, right, that are being impacted by this program, and notable responsibilities, brainstorming weekly learning opportunities. Here is another example. In this case, a student lists learning graphic design. The description reads, obtain certificate to enhance skill set, grow my design business, and seek new techniques to improve. Again, even though this is a self-led activity, this description demonstrates a personal passion, initiative, and impact. One of my biggest pieces of advice is to imagine that for the vast majority of your activities, whoever is reading your application may have a basic idea of what it may entail. For example, if you're in French club, I might assume that you have to speak French and that you have to attend meetings. Therefore, instead of using valuable word count on something that one might assume, use that space to be specific and as detailed as you can be. Plus, you will have the space to elaborate on whichever activity is most meaningful to you, whether that's an extracurricular, paid work, or home or family responsibility. You'll have 200 words to elaborate on that one activity, so be intentional about what you write. You can use those reflection questions from the previous slide to get you started. Next up, the writing section, one of the sections I'm sure many of you all have been waiting on. I want to emphasize that there is no perfect rubric or template for a college essay. Part of what makes reading college essays so fun, it's my favorite part of the college application, is that everyone's going to have a different story, a different approach, and a different style. This is one of those sections that is entirely in your control. So be intentional about the story you choose to share and how you share it. On that note, we know that there are many AI tools out there these days, and we want to remind you that all work produced for your QuestBridge application should be original in thought and creation. Not only can over-reliance on AI tools weaken authenticity and negatively impact the quality of your writing, but also plagiarism or using someone else's work, including that created by generative AI software, is prohibited. We'll share a link in the chat with more details about our AI policy. Now, generally speaking, these are the three main things that you want to review carefully to ensure that you're submitting your best writing. The first is checking for mechanics, right? So you want to check for grammar, you want to read your essay aloud, and this will really help you identify where you might be missing commas or where you may be missing some words. You'll also want to vary your sentence length and structure to create an engaging and sophisticated essay. If all of your sentences are starting the same way, it might feel repetitive or monotone. So try to vary your sentence length and structures. Finally, you want to review your word choice to ensure that it sounds natural and authentic to you. If you're having to look up words in thesaurus or in a dictionary, and it's not a word that you would normally use in your vocabulary, it might be best to not include that word, right? We want it to sound authentic and like it's something that you would genuinely say. The next thing is structure. Using paragraphs will help you plot the direction of your essay, and it will make it easier for your application reader to read your essay. So definitely incorporate paragraphs into your essay. Include transitions to help your reader move from one paragraph to another. And bring your essay full circle by ensuring that each idea feels connected throughout your writing. So each of your paragraphs should be building up to this big main theme or big takeaway for your essay. And finally, the content. In your essay, you want to really ensure that you are focusing on yourself. We are here to learn about you, and admissions officers who are hoping to read your application and admit you are there to admit you, right? So you want to be sure that your essay is focused on you. You want to find a common thread or theme that is present throughout your writing so that it feels connected. You'll want to include unique points that make your story stand out, right? So what makes your story different from anybody else's? You can incorporate descriptive details to show rather than tell us about your story, right? We really want to see your growth, what has shaped you, what has made you grow, and incorporating descriptive details will help visualize that growth. And you want to use a positive lens that really highlights your growth. Right? Sometimes you may have been through something difficult, but using a positive tone will ensure that we feel like you're ready for the next challenge. All right, now let's walk through three different examples. Though these are all made-up examples, they're coming from a place of both having read hundreds of applications And I've been in your shoes before, right? Remember, my goal here is help you strengthen your application. So as we go through these examples, I would encourage you to take notes. Now, the short answer questions in the National College Match application are fun, bite-sized ways to learn more about you pretty quickly. Just because it's a shorter word count, though, doesn't mean that you should rush through them. Every piece of your application is an opportunity to showcase your personality and who you are, including this one. Now, one of my favorite questions in this section is, how do you spend a typical weekend? Here's a sample response. As I talk through this, let me know in the comments what stands out to you in this short response. This example reads, when I'm not working at Big Louie's Crab Shack, you can find me hiking our local trails, where I first discovered my love for botany and understanding the way ecosystems interact with each other. The first thing that stands out to me here is the way that this example showcases a personal passion while balancing a paid work responsibility. Plus, this example demonstrates a sense of intellectual curiosity. This student, in theory, loves to learn by being outside and transformed an initial curiosity from a hike into a love for a field of science. As you're writing your responses, consider what new or insightful information one may learn about you through your short responses. Plus, take note of how even in these short responses, you can use those strategies that we just discussed on the previous slide to strengthen your writing. For example, for instance, this example makes great use of engaging mechanics by building a complex sentence and uses their authentic voice and word choice to add descriptive detail. All right, next example, the writing exercise. In this section of the application, you have a choice from 3 different prompts. You should pick the prompt that you feel you are best equipped to write about. In this example, I've chosen to respond to the prompt about values. As I read, I encourage you to be commenting in the chat about what stands out to you or what you like about this response. Here's a short excerpt from an example. To some, music is an escape, a way to pass time, or even something to fill a void. But for me, music is where I learned the value of patience and persistence. In English class throughout high school, I struggled with close reading analyses, where I was prompted to find the meaning of a short story passage or the application of a classic novel. It didn't instantly click for me like it seemed to for others. It wasn't until I started reading the genius lyric annotations for songs that I liked that I learned that it could be a collaborative process, one where I could build ideas and be inspired to think of my own. Listening to the lyrics pushed me to slow down and keep trying. Now, let's identify a couple of things that stand out. First, I really appreciate the way that this hypothetical student talks about a value they hold through a specific example. They are using a personal challenge to show how this value has shaped them, and in this case, help them overcome an obstacle. So often, the values that we hold come from various moments in our lives where we rely on our values to help us navigate obstacles or challenges. In this case, it's struggling through English class and needing to learn how to be patient when something doesn't come quite as easily as you'd expect. I also like how they're specific about how this value actually came to be. Values don't just appear in our life, they become a part of us through application and practice. So, providing insight into how they develop this value helps us understand the student on a deeper level. Of course, this example would go on to elaborate even more, but hopefully, this gives you an idea of how you can use those earlier strategies we mentioned in your writing. In this case, this writing uses unique and descriptive points to share their story and uses a positive lens to show their growth through an obstacle. And finally, the personal essay. This is the prompt for the personal essay. Describe how the most influential factors and challenges in your life have shaped you into the person you are today. For this writing section in particular, I want to emphasize that there are infinite approaches to writing, but only you will know how to tell your story. No one else will know you as well as you know yourself, and trusting that you have a story within you to share, mold, and craft is half the journey. Now, in this short example, I've created a sample conclusion paragraph. Personally, the conclusion paragraph is often my favorite part of an essay because it's one of the last pieces of writing that we might read in your application. Now, here is the example. While I may have grown up in a small, rural, and quiet town, I now know that I'm also a product of all of the different people and experiences this place provided me. From fundraising for a new library to creating mini language immersion workshops, or coming together to host our annual soybean festival and building after the disaster, this town has molded me into someone who builds solutions and moments that create something bigger than me, community. And as I think about who I want to become, I hope I never lose sight of this town and that I shape others in ways this town has shaped me. Of course, it is hard to assess just the conclusion of an essay, but imagine that this essay touched on the themes and examples mentioned in the conclusion. If I had to identify if I had to identify what makes this a strong writing response, I would say that this essay brings everything full circle by connecting the examples that they theoretically explained in the rest of the essay to the overarching takeaway message, mentioning strong examples that demonstrate their values. This also creates a common thread, in this case, the theme of community. Plus, I appreciate that it also subtly nods to the future by giving insight into the kind of student they'd be on campus. This is definitely not required of a college essay, but if you're having trouble thinking of how to end your essay, a good approach is to look toward the future. Admissions representatives will be curious about the kind of student you'd be on campus, so it can be helpful to demonstrate that in your conclusion if you like. All right, one final thing I do want to touch on before we move on from the writing section is the idea of writing about obstacles and challenges. As I mentioned earlier, sometimes the values that we carry or the way that we are is a result of the obstacles and challenges that we have faced. And we know that this is often the case for students from low income backgrounds. While the examples that we shared in the previous slides didn't quite touch on big obstacles or challenges, that doesn't mean that we don't want to know about those challenges that may have impacted you in your application. In fact, we want you to learn about what has shaped you into the person that you are today. So, if this means touching on challenges or obstacles, we have some helpful reminders and strategies to keep in mind when writing about such topics. First is to focus on your growth. Remember that the focus of your essays should be you and not just your obstacles or just your challenges. Next, highlight what you've learned as a result of your challenges, incorporating ways you may have applied what you learned to further exemplify your growth. And third, lean into a more positive tone. Application readers want to feel that you are ready for college, and demonstrating your emotional maturity and character development will show us that you are ready for that challenge. Another way to put it is to consider whether it feels like you're writing about a scar that you've had time or space to heal from, or whether it might feel like you're still writing about an open wound that you might still be processing. If you are writing and it feels like you're writing about a scar because you're able to reflect and note your growth, then you're on the right track. All right, now let's talk about the additional information section. There are lots of places in the application to share additional context, some of which we've already mentioned before. But here are some specific examples of what you might want to mention in the additional information section. So in the household section, you can talk about changes in household size, income, or employment. You can also talk about whether you've moved frequently or if you've ever experienced unstable housing. And you can also mention challenges in the household that may be impacting your academics or your opportunities for involvement. And of course, these are just some examples, right? If there's something along these lines or something completely different that you feel may be relevant, you can absolutely share those too. In the academic section, you can share limitations to your class schedule or class offerings. So maybe you really wanted to take a certain class, but it didn't fit in your schedule, or maybe there wasn't room, or maybe, there's a million different situations that could happen. You can share that information in the additional information section, in the academic section. You can also share additional context for low grades, and you can share any challenges that you've experienced in the classroom that affected you or your academics. And finally, in the more overarching additional information section, you can share any information that couldn't be captured in another section due to word count limits. So maybe there was another activity that you really, really wanted to mention, or maybe in the income and asset section, you needed to share more context. This would be a great place to share that. You can also share any challenges or hardships that may have shaped or impacted you. Maybe you felt like it didn't quite fit into your essay, and instead you want to share them in a more, factual and direct way in the additional information section, and that's completely okay. And finally, if there are any other details about you that are important to understand who you are, you can certainly share those in the additional information section. So really, my approach to the additional information section is when in doubt, write it out. Another approach to this section is to actually read your application from start to finish and then reflect on whether there is anything that you might be unclear or confusing to someone who doesn't know much about you. If you have that thought as you're reviewing your application, take some time to provide additional context in the additional information section. All right. Now, I'm actually going to pass it over to Karina from Glimpse, who will be sharing more information about the optional video that is part of the National College Math application.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. All right, awesome. So it's so great to be able to chat a little bit about Glimpse for all of you. You may have heard of us before, you may not have, but either way, in these next few minutes, you'll certainly become experts. So we can hop over to the next slide. So Glimpse is a 60 to 90 second. It's a tool that allows you to record a 60 to 90 second video as part of your application. So it's something that you can use as part of your QuestBridge application, just to highlight a little bit more about yourself outside of the academics, outside of your activities list, right? Things that you're not able to share in your written application, you're using your Glimpse for to be able to literally insert your voice into the process, insert your story, right? And it's a great way to stand out among the many students who are applying to QuestBridge. So to get to add a little bit of color to your application. You can go to the next slide. So I want to show you a couple
Hello, my name is Maimona Torre, and
I want to show you a couple of
my
examples.
name
These
is
are real
Maimona.
students who have recorded glimpses and sent them as part of their applications, just so you can see how other students have used it. And I'll share a little some tips after each one. So this is Maimuna.
Hello, my name is Maimona Torre, and I am a senior at the Philadelphia High School for Girls. I felt like it was really important to make this video because I wanted to stand out as an applicant and not just be another name. I wanted to talk about things that I like to do outside of school, not just my extracurriculars and not just my academics, because you have all of that in my application. I wanted to tell you a couple things about myself. I am a big fanatic of anything animated, as you can see on my walls and my tapestries and the way that I decorate my room. I'm a very lively person. I like being in the midst of things. There's a lot of things in my life, though, that I feel like have been some sort of setback, but I really don't let those things weigh me down because I feel like those things had to happen for a reason. And if it were not for those experiences and those conversations that I've had with people in the past, and I wouldn't be the person that I am now. And I found a way, even though it was a little bit hard for me, I found a way to just be in love with everything that I am right now in the moment instead of stressing about what I might be in the future. Even though I do have a lot of plans for myself in the future and the way that I want to help my community and the way that I want to help others that have helped me, I really like the idea of outreach and bringing back to the community what was taken from us or that we haven't had. So I think that's just a big part of who I am as a person, and I hope you consider me for my application.
All right, awesome. So you'll notice a couple of things, right? It's just Maimuna and the camera. There's no editing, no filters, none of that. So you're recording directly through the Glimpse platform as a way to highlight authenticity. You don't have to worry about making the perfect package here. We're not looking for TikTok stars. It's really just to hop on and share a little bit about yourself, share, something that you can talk about for hours, right? I know I've seen a couple of things in the chat about things like, oh, I feel like I'm going to mess up 1,000 times. Totally fine, because you can re-record as many times as you need to until you're happy with the video and sending it moving forward. Okay, I'll show one more example.
Hi, my name is Adrian Perret. I am 17 and a junior at Century High School. Some interesting facts about me is that my last name isn't as common as in the United States as a lot of other names. It is Argentinian, as I am half Argentinian on my dad's side. And a lot of people mistaken it with Perez or Parrot, but it's pronounced Perret. I get that a lot. Another interesting fact is that I do have a summer job working as a lifeguard in my nearby water park. It is really cool. I did get certified in CPR, which I find really interesting. And I am the second youngest out of a family of 6. I have 3 older brothers and 2 sisters, one older and one younger. Hopefully, I'll be the first one in my family to attend college or take the college path in life to study radiology, as it is an interest of mine. And rather than not attending college like some of my family, or joining taking after my brothers and joining the Marines or Army, I would want to study radiology. Thank you for listening.
So I was like showing that example because I feel like some students or some counselors feel like if you're not super camera ready, if you're not super bubbly, right, this may not be, something that you can do well. But for students who are a little bit more reserved, maybe a little quieter, like Adrian was, this is totally a great process for you because you can do it in your own comfort space, right? As long as you have a device that has a camera that can connect to the internet, you can do this anywhere. We also have a mobile app so you can do it on your phone. So just really go where you're more comfortable, where you can be your most authentic self, so you can share a little bit about yourself, and add some complexity to your application, add a little bit of personality for them to just learn a little bit more about you.
My name is
So
Dorothy
this
Danso,
this
and
isn't
I'm a high
a
school.
glimpse example, but Dorothy is a student that applied to Questbridge last year. She used Glimpse as part of her process. She matched to WashU. She's very happily off at her first week of school, and she wanted to share a little bit about her experience with Glimpse and also give you all some tips to think about as you go off and hopefully complete your own Glimpse for your application.
My name is Dorothy Danso, and I'm a high school senior at West End Secondary School in the Upper West Side. I was so fortunate enough to match to Washington University in St. Louis through Questbridge, and I actually used Glimpse to elevate my application. So just to describe my Glimpse experience, I really liked Glimpse. It was something super new for me because I'm just so used to like writing responses as a way to like try and get into programs or just talk a bit about myself. But the opportunity to have a video was just so astounding to me because I saw it more as an opportunity to just put a face to my application because these Questbridge reviewers were reading a whole bunch of applications. I really enjoyed being able to just talk, and even like in a way that was informal, which I really liked. Recording for me, it was actually really fun. I went into my bedroom. I set up my laptop where I thought it was right. What I did was I wanted to talk a bit about my what I call my memory box, which is it's basically like a jewelry box with a bunch of like pictures and different mementos from different like fun experiences that I've had that I've never done before. I'm very thoughtful and reflective over the little things that I have. I thought that was like a really great and unique quality to convey in my application, especially because it was like the last piece of my application. A big part of Glimpse's role in preparing me for college is just practice getting out of my comfort zone and being open to new opportunities, especially when it can only benefit me and rather than hurt me. Just having this video just as a way to show like a little memento of like trying new things. It was just really helped to put a spin on how I presented myself. I would say if any of you are considering or just hesitant about like doing a glimpse video, I just say to just do it. Literally, that's pretty much like the whole message from my memory box. Just like go for it and have fun with it. I really think that this glimpse video is just a perfect way to elevate your application, just make you stick out among like thousands and thousands of applicants. Just like a little final tips. A big thing that I did before I started speaking in my glimpse essay, just because, like I said before, I tend to just rant, just like coming up with obviously my idea, but also a little like format, but a very brief, broad one because a big part of this is just authenticity. There is not like the most perfect video. It's really which video shows what you're trying to convey the best. To end off this video, I just want to say, go glimpse.
Right. So the biggest thing I want to highlight from what Dorothy mentioned is have fun with it, right? You're meant to talk about things that you are excited about, that you're passionate about, that you love. Like anything you have excitement for, they're gonna feel that on the other side of the camera. You're building that human connection with the folks reading your application, and that's how they're gonna advocate more for you on the other side, right? And I do see a couple of questions of, should I be talking about something that's not in my application? Absolutely. This is your opportunity to share something new about you, whether it's, your sense of humor, whether it's your love for anime. I see a couple of people talking about that, right? Just something to add a little bit more color to the application, for them to learn, more about you and imagine what you might be like on campus. Okay. So some quick tips before I hop off, right? Be yourself. right? The reason that colleges are looking to videos like this is because they really want to meet the authentic version of students, right? They want to make sure that they're really meeting you and getting to know you, right? So don't feel like you have to put yourself in a box of what you think that they want to hear. This is your opportunity to show yourself and be at the be the leader in how you tell your story, right? The biggest thing that I can tell you is don't write a script, don't read while you're recording. I know that you're going to have that instinct to over prepare, to get all the words perfectly, but that's not what this process is about, right? We've heard from admissions officers that they love all different types of videos that come through, but the ones that they really don't learn much about the student and they can't really connect to the student is when the student is very clearly reading, because you're not going to emote the same way that you do. You're not going to be able to show how passionate you feel about something because you're really monotone and reading something, right? Don't feel like you have to do that. Just hit record and share a little bit about yourself. And 17 to 18 years is a lot to fit into 90 seconds. So don't feel like you have to cover your whole life, right? I know the prompt is, talk about something that you can talk about for hours. Just pick one thing that you're passionate about, that you want to share a little bit about, and just, help admissions officers imagine what you might be like on campus. Okay. So that's the end of my spiel. But if you have any questions, definitely feel free to email us at glimpse@initialview.com. You're basically emailing me. I'm the one that responds to all those emails, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have. I know there are some resources being sent through the chat. We also have a Ask Me Anything webinar with Northwestern coming up in a few weeks. So definitely feel free, if you have any additional questions about Glimpse, join us for that as well. Okay. Good luck with applications.
All right. Thank you so much, Karina, for your really valuable insights about the optional Glimpse video. Now, before we go into what to do before you submit, I want to highlight some additional resources for some of the sections that we mentioned previously. So one of them is the Acing Your Activities section worksheet. If you're really having trouble with completing that section of the application, if you don't know what to write about or which activities to select, I would encourage you to start with this worksheet. This is a really helpful worksheet and will actually help you brainstorm what to write about in those description sections. You can also explore our How to Write a College Essay webpage. Again, if you are having trouble getting started or you don't know, what you need to be including in an essay, or you just want some tips and pointers, this is a really great place to start. It's honestly really helpful. There's a lot of like FAQs. There's tips and tricks for like each of the parts of an essay, like the mechanics and the content and the structure. So this is a great resource. And finally, if you don't know how to write about your additional information that you want to include, you can use our additional information guide. This will help you review the prompt. It'll help you brainstorm and then actually, narrowing down what exactly you'll be sharing in your application. So these resources will be really helpful as you are completing your application. And these are all available in our resource library. All right. Now we are almost at the end, so hang in there. Hopefully we'll have some time for questions, but let's review what you should do before you are ready to submit. First up, you should really reflect on your application. If you can, and I strongly encourage that you take some time away from your application before you submit it, because this will not only help you look at your application with fresh eyes when you get back to it, but also a college application is a lot of work, right? So it requires a lot of focus, a lot of concentration, a lot of reflection. And so leaving it to the last minute is not advisable, right? I mean, people will do it, but it's really not advisable, especially if you're wanting to make sure that your application shines. Starting early so that you have time later to really reflect and slow down will be really helpful. Now, once you've completed your application, use the following reflection questions to really better assess which sections or areas you can improve. You might need some editing. You can determine which sections of your application might need some editing or maybe even some rearranging. So here are the questions that you can consider. Are there topics that I've explored multiple times? If you find that you are writing about the same thing in your long essay and some of your shorter essay and some of your short responses, maybe there's space to change it up a little bit, right? Is there anything missing about who I am, right? If you feel like there's something that you didn't write about that really is important to who you are, you should include that. Does this application demonstrate growth and self-awareness? Does this application give a peek into who I would want to be in the future, right? Because college admission representatives are trying to determine who to admit into their class, right? To shape the class that will be a great fit for their school. And so kind of understanding who you might be on their campus or who you might be in the future will be really helpful for them to learn about in your essay, in your application. Does this application feel authentic and representative of me? And does each piece of the application come together as a whole? Now, keep in mind that you won't be able to edit your application once you submit it in September. So the application that you submit then will be the same application that colleges receive for the match and or Questbridge regular decision. All right. Now, finally, but certainly not least, review your application proof. If you are curious about what we are going to see as we are reading your application, just look at the application proof. And as you look it over, you should ensure that your writing is complete and that all of your characters are appearing correctly. Using lots of paragraph breaks can lead to your writing being cut off. So that's something that you definitely want to make sure as you're reviewing your application proof. Make sure that all of your writing is there. And some characters may not appear if you are writing in a different alphabet, right? So if you are writing something in a different language, just make sure that it appears because oftentimes it will not appear. And use this as an opportunity to review your entire application and catch any mistakes like incorrect information, grammar and spelling, and copy and paste mishaps. So we see that all the time. We get emails after people have submitted their applications being like, oh, I didn't copy something correctly. So those are the kinds of things that we really do encourage you to review before you submit. And before you submit, just double check that all of your information is accurate and correct, because incorrect information can have a negative impact on your application. So really take time for this step. And if you need some help resolving errors, you can explore our Ask UB help portal, or you can always email us, of course. Now, before we reach the end of this webinar, who better than a Questbridge scholar to also share one of the most valuable reminders throughout your application process? So here is Elizabeth with some words of wisdom. I would like to emphasize the importance of acknowledging your journey while embracing who you are. Everyone has different opportunities given to them, yet it is up to us to determine the importance and attention they will be given. Give yourself an applause for the challenges you have overcome. Take your experiences as lessons. Observe your surroundings to appreciate what you have and be present in what today is. I want to emphasize that your college application is uniquely your own. You get to choose which stories to share, which sides of you to highlight, and most importantly, how you craft your story. For many of us, the journey to this point, right, applying to college may not have been easy. But as Elizabeth says, give yourself a round of applause for simply being here. You are here and you're curious about how to strengthen your application, which means that you are in the right place. All right, folks, that is the conclusion of our Strengthening Your Application webinar, and we are so happy that you joined us tonight. As a reminder, your National Contract application is due September 30th at 11:59 p.m. Pacific time. We really cannot wait to read your application.